What if death isn't the end, but the ultimate transition? What if the afterlife isn't a place you go to, but a state of being you return to? These aren't just abstract philosophical questions. They're fundamental to understanding the true nature of reality and your place within it. The implications of shifting your perspective on death are enormous, because the very way you perceive the process of passing greatly affects the way that you live, the fear you carry, and even the potential of your future experiences. What if the common concepts of an afterlife are not entirely accurate, and that the very nature of our soul is far more complex and far more empowering than we currently understand? Most people conceive of death as the end of existence, the final curtain call, or even a journey to some distant realm. But what if the reality is far more intricate and elegant? Consider this. What if your soul isn't a distinct entity that travels somewhere else, but instead a unique pattern of energy and information, like a wave rising from an ocean? When we die, this wave doesn't simply vanish. Instead, it disperses back into the ocean, returning to its source. Or perhaps consider your consciousness as a specific radio frequency. When your body ceases to function, the radio turns off, and that unique frequency disperses, yet the energy that once fueled it remains, reabsorbed back into the wider electromagnetic field. This is a very different concept to the idea that we go somewhere after we die, and in fact, it might be the case that the very fabric of our reality is not what we perceive it to be at all. What if, like a character in a video game, our entire physical life is merely a projection, and when the character dies, it is merely a respawning into another level of experience, a concept we can use as a window into a more accurate representation of death? But to understand this, we must first challenge our deeply ingrained perception of time. Most of us experience life as a linear progression, moving from past to present to future. However, this might be just an illusion, a construct of our limited perspective within the confines of this specific dimension of reality. For example, have you ever noticed how time seems to bend and warp during a dream, where entire narratives unfold in what feels like minutes? Or how in a video game, time can be manipulated at will, saved, and reloaded, where the notion of linear time and progression completely breaks down. Perhaps all moments exist simultaneously, and our experience of time is only due to the limitations of our current perspective. If this idea of linear time is not fixed, then the common ideas surrounding where the soul goes may also be erroneous, because it might not be going anywhere in a linear sense, but merely transitioning to a different state of being entirely. Furthermore, our traditional understanding of reality may be incomplete, because we still don't fully understand the nature of consciousness itself. Consider the hard problem of consciousness, the fact that we don't really know how subjective experience arises from physical matter, which challenges our current models of reality. What if consciousness is not a byproduct of the brain, but a fundamental aspect of the universe itself, more primary than matter, and that our subjective experience, the very thing we take for granted, is actually the most fundamental aspect of reality? If we're in a simulation, as we have considered, then what is running the simulation? It will be the consciousness that is the primary factor. This isn't just an intellectual exercise, it's a profoundly personal inquiry that has the potential to reshape the very core of your understanding. By understanding that the idea of where the soul goes is not a literal journey, we begin to realize that the nature of our soul and the nature of consciousness itself is far more layered than we may have previously understood. This new understanding can transform your relationship with death from one of fear and anxiety into one of acceptance and empowerment, and will dramatically enhance your present moment awareness and provide you with a greater sense of personal power and agency. If our understanding of death is largely based on fear, then that fear can become a self-fulfilling prophecy in the way that we experience a transition. And so, just like all the other aspects of our life, what we believe about death shapes our reality, and if we hold a limiting belief, then we may manifest a limiting experience. This idea that you have agency over your reality is a core message that we will continue to reinforce throughout this video. This notion that you're not a passive bystander, but instead an active co-creator of your reality, has profound implications for the next experience after death. You'll find that your life is not just something that happens to you, but a complex process in which you have the power to participate and to shape through your intentions. You may be limited to a certain degree by the parameters of your current reality, but when these limitations disappear, so too do the constraints. The idea that we may unknowingly limit ourselves by holding on to outdated models of death or the afterlife can be incredibly disempowering, and therefore the more accurate our understanding, the better. But before we go deeper into this, let's examine what modern science can tell us about consciousness. We still can't fully explain how consciousness arises or how subjective experience is created. This is a clear sign that our current models of reality are incomplete, and they therefore can't be relied upon to provide all the answers. The core idea that we will build upon is that consciousness is the fundamental aspect of reality, the engine that drives everything, and that our physical world is merely a projection of consciousness, and that our subjective experience is the one true fundamental. This is a key point that will serve as a basis for many of the arguments that follow, because it will allow us to view our lives in a new and profound way. We will delve into how this ties into the idea that consciousness is a field of information, not bound by our ideas of linear time, and how this may impact our understanding of the death process. The idea that the individual experience of consciousness is like a wave that is born, lives, and then returns to the ocean from which it came, will be a recurring metaphor throughout this journey, and will provide a clear framework for us to understand these concepts on a more intuitive level. All knowledge is gained through a process of deconstruction, and this is how the information in this video will be presented. We will slowly challenge the conventional views of reality, deconstruct the most common misconceptions surrounding death, and slowly rebuild a new and empowering understanding that challenges all prior assumptions. So, if death is merely a transition, then what does the next experience look like? Is it possible to influence the parameters of this next experience with the choices that you make in this life? The conventional ideas surrounding death and the afterlife may be largely based on misunderstandings, and perhaps the heavens and hells that we often hear about are not literal destinations, but reflections of a state of consciousness. What if you could unknowingly limit your potential future experiences by holding on to limiting beliefs? If you are holding on to limiting beliefs, then you are creating a limiting experience. By now, you will begin to see that your intention and present moment awareness are playing a crucial role in how you experience not only this life, but potentially also the next. We will explore how these practical aspects of your lived experience can radically alter your future state of consciousness. This idea that your life has more significance than you currently understand, and that you have influence over what is to come, should leave you with a desire to understand these concepts in more detail. So, as we move through this video, we'll reveal how your own consciousness has the power to shape your experiences, not only in this life, but beyond. So, let's delve deeper into the concept of the soul. We've touched on the idea of the soul as energy, but what if we refine this further, viewing it not as a distinct particle, but as a wave of information and energy, a pattern existing within a vast field? In quantum physics, the observer effect shows us that the very act of observation can change the nature of reality, implying that our consciousness is not just passively receiving the world, but is actively shaping it. Consider quantum entanglement, where two particles become linked and instantaneously affect each other across vast distances, as though space itself is an illusion. Could this principle be reflected in our understanding of consciousness, and how different conscious experiences may be interconnected within a larger field? If each of our conscious experiences is like a unique radio signal, then when the physical radio breaks, the signal doesn't disappear, but disperses back into the electromagnetic field, just like the wave returns to the ocean from which it arose. Each of these signals is a unique frequency, carrying its own distinct pattern of information, which may also be part of a single greater consciousness, not entirely separate as we perceive. This brings us to the idea that reality might fundamentally be information, and that consciousness may be the organizing principle within this complex system. Consider the way a computer program uses data, where everything, from the graphics on the screen to the characters' movements, is nothing more than processed data rendered into a coherent experience. Could our perception of reality be similar, a complex program that is rendered through our consciousness, with our lives as specific forms of data processing? This idea may also explain how the soul, as a pattern of data, could potentially be stored and accessed, which hints at possibilities that are often described in the concept of the Akashic records, where all events, thoughts, and emotions of the past, present, and future are said to be stored. As we deconstruct traditional views of the soul as a separate entity, we start to see that they do not fully align with our current understanding of physics or information theory, and therefore we need to be open to rebuilding our understanding based upon a more accurate model of reality. The old scientific models that have been superseded by more accurate ones can be a helpful analogy, because this is exactly what we are seeing when we begin to examine our outdated models of the soul. And when we look at ancient cultural ideas surrounding the soul, we often find recurring themes and patterns that align not only with each other, but also with modern concepts, which provides evidence that some core truths have been explored throughout human history. Now, let's connect the idea of consciousness as information and energy to the concept of nonlinear time. We experience time as a linear progression, but if reality is fundamentally information, then this information exists outside of our constraints of linear time. Think about a movie. When the film is complete, the data that makes up the movie still exists, even if the film is no longer being played. In this way, the information transcends the linear timeline of the film itself, which is an excellent metaphor for the way that consciousness may exist outside of our current system. Just as a video game has save states, the data of your life, the information that is your unique pattern of consciousness, still remains. And it's within this understanding that we start to realize that our limited view of reality and time may not be as absolute as we have always believed, thereby suggesting the possibility of other forms of existence that we have not yet begun to comprehend. This brings us back to our discussion of time as an illusion, where we can use simulation theory to understand how time may not be as linear as it seems. In a video game, when a character dies, it can often respawn immediately, in the same way a save state can be loaded. This idea of respawning can be an excellent metaphor for the way that consciousness may move between different experiences, or lives. Because from the perspective of the player, the death and rebirth is not an ending, but simply another step in the gameplay. From this view, our lives might be like various save files of the simulation, each a unique experience, but ultimately a part of a single greater process. If we relate this to our wave-ocean metaphor, then the death of the wave may just be a temporary dispersal of energy back to the ocean, a return to the source from which it came. From the perspective of the ocean, there is no beginning or end, only a continuous state of being, and this begins to show us how our limited view of time is often just that, a limited view. This then leads us to the concept of present moment awareness. If time is an illusion, and all that we truly have is the present moment, then this single moment becomes the entire focus of our experience, and a way of transcending our limiting ideas of linear time. By focusing on the present, we can become aware of the way that our perception of time is limited to our current perspective, and that by changing that perspective, we gain a greater understanding of the nature of consciousness itself. This very moment, this experience, is the only reality that we can truly know, and this can be a very empowering idea when we understand its deeper implications. The power of now is truly the power of your consciousness, and it is the only constant that we have, even beyond the passing of this life. Continuing with our simulation metaphor, what if the parameters of this game were not fixed, but instead open to change based on our own intentions, where our lives are akin to levels that we are designing, or that our experiences are like characters that we are selecting? Perhaps the choices we make within our current reality not only shape our experience here, but they also influence the parameters of what is to come. The idea that our lives are self-created, consciously or subconsciously, is a key point to understand, because it implies that this process extends beyond this specific system of reality, which opens up a new understanding of the death process. The idea that the point of death may just be a reset or restart option for future experience is an intriguing thought. But to truly understand the nature of death, we have to push the complexity even further by considering the possibility that all events exist simultaneously in a higher dimension. This idea challenges our perception of time and space and deepens the sense of mystery that surrounds our reality. Could it be that past, present, and future are not linear as we perceive, but instead are interwoven as a complete tapestry, all existing at once? This concept begins to echo the idea of the Akashic records, which is another possibility that has been explored in ancient teachings, implying a nonlinear nature of time. Just imagine a book where all of the pages exist at the same time while you read it from start to finish, experiencing it in a linear fashion. In this way, our perception of linear time is just that, a perception and not an absolute reality, which is where we can truly begin to explore our own potential as conscious beings. So, if time and space are less fixed than we believe, what can we say about the foundation of our reality? Let's introduce the concepts of idealism and panpsychism. Idealism suggests that reality is rooted in consciousness, and not matter, meaning that consciousness is the primary substance of reality, whereas panpsychism proposes that every object has an aspect of mind or consciousness. This means that consciousness is not merely an emergent property of the brain, but rather a fundamental aspect of the universe itself, and that what we perceive to be separate is, in reality, an interconnected field of consciousness, as in a universal mind. If our physical world is a projection of consciousness, then our subjective experience, the very thing we often overlook, becomes the key to understanding reality. It's easy to focus on the physical, but it is our individual awareness that makes the external world real. We need to understand that our physical experience is only one way that we can interact with the universe, and that there may exist other modes of being that transcend the limitations of an embodied entity. The subjective quality of experience is the one true fundamental aspect of reality, the only thing that we can know with absolute certainty, and all other aspects are merely interpretations based on that foundational knowledge. What we see as real is only real in relation to our subjective experience of it, and so it's clear to see that by relying only on the physical when attempting to understand reality, we are inherently limiting our understanding. And here we see how all of this connects back to the simulation metaphor, because if consciousness is the engine that drives the simulation, then the observer is not a passive bystander, but an active element in the creation of reality itself. Just as the software is more important than the hardware, then consciousness can be seen as the primary element. The deeper we explore these ideas, the clearer it becomes that understanding consciousness is not an abstract philosophical pursuit, but a way of understanding our true potential as conscious beings. The more we understand about consciousness, the more empowered we become within all aspects of our experience, not only in this life, but also in the next. This now takes us to the practical aspects of all of this, and the power of intention. Intention is not merely a desire or a wish, but it's a focused form of energy that shapes your reality in the same way that focused attention changes the results of quantum experiments. When we direct our intention with clarity and belief, it acts as a template, a form of code that we present to the universe, with our belief acting as the compiler. This is where the observer effect comes into play once more, as the act of focused attention directly influences the outcome, whether we are aware of it or not. So, by intentionally focusing on what we desire, combined with the belief that it is already so, we become a powerful creative force. Our beliefs about death, and what comes after, also directly impact our experience of it. If we believe that death is painful, then that may become our reality, and if we believe it to be peaceful, loving, and full of light, then that too may become true. This is the idea of the self-fulfilling prophecy playing out, where our conscious and subconscious beliefs shape the world around us, and potentially even our experience beyond this life. And so, the common fears that surround death may themselves create a fearful experience, which is the opposite of the empowered understanding that we wish to cultivate. We must see that we are not passive recipients of life or death, but active co-creators of both. We have the power to shape our experiences through focused intention, and by consciously choosing the beliefs that we hold, we are directly impacting the reality that we live, and potentially the reality that we will live in the future. The old idea that we are at the mercy of some external force may be nothing more than a limiting belief, and that through the power of intention, we can regain the feeling of agency and power that is our birthright. And this is where we begin to understand that the state of our consciousness at the time of our death may have a significant influence on the experiences that we manifest next. It's not just about our actions in this life, but also about our intention and our state of awareness in the present moment. The idea of a conscious death becomes particularly important here, meaning that by approaching the death process with intention and awareness, we potentially influence the experience that awaits us, and we can begin to see that death may not be a random process at all. And so, we are setting the stage for the final reveal that is to come. This leads us to the possibility that our state of consciousness at the moment of death may greatly influence our next experience, which is why it is essential to approach the death process with intention and to live a life of present moment awareness. If we can prepare for this transition through practices such as mindfulness, contemplation, and self-development work, then we will be much better equipped to approach death in a conscious and empowered way, rather than in a state of fear and confusion. Just like we prepare for events in our lives, we can also prepare for the death process, and by understanding the mechanics of this transition, we can dramatically alter our perception of it. What if a lack of awareness at death could lead to negative outcomes, such as being trapped in a cycle of repetition? A lack of self-awareness, negative thought loops, and limiting belief systems can become self-perpetuating, especially when the systems that keep them in place are no longer active. This may be the basis of some of the hells that are described in ancient scriptures, and might even be self-created as a result of a lack of focused intention. And so, in this way, we can see that a lack of intention and awareness can lead to a respawn into an undesirable experience. The practice of mindfulness, then, becomes a way of preparing for this death experience. By observing our thought processes and becoming aware of the mechanics of our consciousness, we are practicing for the process of passing from this life. We can also see that all of these concepts reinforce the idea of the power of the observer, the active participation that we have in the creation of reality, both here and beyond. This then shows that the traditional view of an afterlife as something outside of our control is not necessarily accurate, and that the experience of the next life may be a direct result of our state of consciousness and our level of preparation. And here we begin to see the possibility that the idea of being at the mercy of an external God or some arbitrary system is not completely true. We may, in fact, have more agency over this entire process than we previously thought, and this ties back into our simulation metaphor by suggesting that we are active agents within this system and not just passive observers. Finally, let's arrive at the most significant reveal. That death, rather than a journey to an unknown place, may be a return to the fundamental source of consciousness itself, a reintegration with the very fabric of reality. This is where our wave and ocean metaphor becomes more complete, showing how each individual consciousness is like a drop from the ocean, and that when that drop breaks, it is simply reabsorbed back into the ocean from which it came. The journey of the individual wave is not an ending, but a return to the source, and in this way, death may be more akin to a transition or change of state, rather than the ending of existence. And in a similar way, our consciousness may be like a radio signal dispersing back into the electromagnetic field, a return of energy to the source, not an ending or a going somewhere. This understanding, therefore, helps to demystify the process of death, removing a lot of the fear and anxiety that surrounds it. What if it is simply the process of reintegration, a shift from one form to another? When seen in this light, we can begin to realize that death is not a complete end, and that all that we are is a part of a far greater process. And this knowledge can be an incredible source of empowerment, giving us agency and a feeling of security and peace. It is here that we bring together all the various patterns that we have explored throughout this video. The simulation metaphor, the concept of the soul as energy, nonlinear time, and personal agency, all interwoven as aspects of the same overall system. The respawning concept from video games again becomes useful, as it helps us to understand how the character returns to the source and has the option to reselect new parameters. In this way, the soul returns to its source and may have the opportunity to reselect future experiences. And so, in this way, a feeling of completion and resolution begins to appear. Finally, let's offer a final perspective shift. What if death is a transition back to our natural state, and that it is, in fact, our physical life that is the unnatural state? If we consider that our consciousness may be limited by the experience of living in the physical world, then it might be that death provides us with a return to the expanded awareness that we once had. From this perspective, our current experience could be seen as a form of limitation compared with the greater field of awareness. And so we begin to see that everything we've discussed throughout this video is part of a single truth. So let's bring all of these concepts into focus. From the perspective of consciousness, death is not a journey to some external place, but a process of reintegration, a return to the fundamental field of awareness from which all consciousness originates. Think of it as the wave returning to the ocean, the signal dispersing back into the electromagnetic field, the character returning to the source of the game. It's a transition to a new state of being, a shift in perspective, not an end to existence itself. This is the core idea that has been building up throughout this entire discussion, the central point that will now illuminate the path forward and help you to understand the nature of this transition. This understanding now completely transforms what we previously knew of death, from a scary and unknown concept into something that is far more approachable and understandable. Throughout this journey, we have consistently deconstructed the limiting beliefs that surround the death process and rebuilt them into empowering concepts, moving from fear to understanding, from passivity to agency. We began with traditional views of death, the fear of hell, the idea of oblivion, and challenged those ideas using concepts from quantum physics, philosophy, and consciousness studies. We explored how consciousness may be like a radio signal, a unique frequency within a larger field, and how our individual experiences may be like water droplets within the ocean. Each of these ideas has added depth and context to the overall picture, and this now allows us to clearly understand that death is not an ending, but a return to the source from which all originates. This pattern of deconstruction and rebuilding has acted as a roadmap, showing how we can use reason, philosophy, and logic to better understand the mysteries of existence. We've also seen that consciousness is not a byproduct of the physical body, but is, in fact, the fundamental aspect of reality. It's not bound by the constraints of space or time, and therefore exists outside of the linear perspective we normally adopt. Our physical experience is only one way that we can interact with the universe, and there may exist other modes of being beyond that of an embodied entity. By understanding that consciousness is the software, rather than the body, which is the hardware, we begin to understand the true nature of reality and of the death process. This means that the subjective quality of experience is truly the fundamental aspect of reality, and that by becoming aware of this, we can have greater influence over it. With this understanding, our entire perspective of life, death, and the universe can be transformed forever. We are not just passive observers, but active participants in the creation of our reality, both in this life and beyond it. This new perspective empowers us to approach life with greater awareness and intention, recognizing the creative power that exists within us. It also allows us to approach death not with fear, but with a sense of peace and understanding, as we now know that it is merely another stage in the ongoing process of consciousness. It is now that we begin to clearly see that the more we understand these concepts, the more empowered we become in this life and in the transition beyond it. Now, let's place this understanding of the death process into a broader context. It's not just an isolated event, but is, in fact, intrinsically linked with our understanding of the nature of reality itself. The more we know of one, the more we know of the other, which shows us that our investigation into the nature of death has also been an investigation into the nature of consciousness and reality. By understanding that consciousness is the source of all reality, we begin to understand the immense significance of the concepts that we've discussed and the powerful impact that they can have on our lives. This shows that the deeper we explore this area of knowledge, the clearer the picture becomes, and it all begins to form a cohesive whole. We must see that death is not an ending, but a natural part of the cycle of life and consciousness. It's an important part of the overall system, and not something to be feared or avoided. Consciousness transforms through various states of experience, and this transformation is a continuous process with no true end point, which further supports the nonlinear ideas that we have been exploring. The concepts surrounding consciousness, energy, information, and transformation are not separate, but interwoven elements of a single underlying reality. And by understanding the individual elements, we can gain a greater understanding of the whole. Each idea has played its own unique part in building this understanding, and it is now that they all come together to form a cohesive overview. This new perspective has many empowering implications, as it reveals that we have an active role to play in our own experience, not only in this life, but also beyond it. Each of our actions, our beliefs, and our intentions can influence our future states of awareness, and therefore we can see our current experience as a training ground for conscious transitions into new forms of existence. By accepting that this life is a training for the conscious transition that is to come, we can better understand the true value of our current experiences and the importance of living each moment with intention. It begins to become very clear that this moment is just as important as the next, as each one is a preparation for the next. When we understand death as a transition back into the larger field of consciousness, we can begin to approach it with intention and agency, instead of fear and anxiety. It's not a random or chaotic process, but is instead something that can be understood and prepared for. This understanding empowers us to take control of our experience and to make conscious decisions that will influence our future states of being, and this knowledge alone can dramatically transform our perception of the entire experience of life and death. Now we know that death is not a passive experience, but rather a conscious one that we can begin preparing for in this very moment. Let's bring all the key concepts together now. The ideas that we've discussed throughout this video, simulation theory, the soul as energy, nonlinear time, and personal agency, all coalesce into the final idea of reintegration, the idea that we are a part of a greater whole. The drop does indeed rejoin the ocean. The signal does, in fact, dissipate back into the field, and the character does return to the source of the game. Each of these analogies is a facet of the same core truth, showing how we can use metaphors to understand abstract concepts. They all point to the same idea, that we are not separate individuals, but a part of a single, larger consciousness. The simulation theory has acted as a powerful metaphor, helping us to understand abstract concepts of consciousness, nonlinearity, and personal agency. Through the use of save states, respawning, and character selection, we can see how the death process can be understood in the same way, a transformation from one state of experience to the next. These models are not meant to be taken literally, but to be used as a vehicle for exploring these complex concepts, giving us a more relatable way of understanding them, and thereby allowing us to expand our own personal understanding. And so, in this way, the metaphor becomes a tool, and this tool can then lead to more profound insights into the mysteries of reality. So, where does your soul go after death? The answer is, it doesn't go anywhere. It returns to the source from which it originated. The individual wave returns to the ocean, the signal disperses back into the field, and the character returns to the source of the game. But it's important to understand that this is not a simple answer, as it is, in fact, a paradox. It's a return and a continuation, a beginning and an end, all at the same time. It's an answer, yes, but an answer that should be explored, pondered, and considered from as many angles as possible. And it's here that we must accept that this is not a simple truth, and that it requires further contemplation and personal understanding. Finally, let's address the feelings of fear and anxiety that often accompany the thought of death. Understanding the concepts that we've discussed here helps to dissolve those feelings, as it reveals that the death process is not a random and chaotic event, but a natural and understandable transition that we can consciously prepare for through practices like meditation and contemplation. With this knowledge, we can begin to approach death not with fear, but with a sense of curiosity and even excitement, as we now know that it is not an ending, but the beginning of a new phase of consciousness. By reframing our understanding of the death process, we can begin to live our lives with greater peace, purpose, and intention. Now, with all of these ideas in mind, let's consider some new questions. What truly exists beyond the reintegration with the source? Are there different modes of experience that we have yet to comprehend? What are the mechanics of these other states of awareness? By continuing to explore these questions, we can further expand our understanding of the nature of consciousness, and we may begin to realize that there are still vast areas of knowledge that are beyond our current grasp. The journey of discovery is an ongoing process, and so there is always more to explore and even more to understand. The implications of what we've discussed in this video are far-reaching and can be used as a springboard for further self-reflection and personal development. There are areas of philosophy, such as idealism and panpsychism and quantum physics, that can be further investigated to provide even greater insight, as well as the ideas surrounding consciousness and metaphysics, all of which have a direct and powerful effect on our own personal empowerment. The path to understanding is an ongoing journey, and it is a journey that we can all take. By diving deeper into these areas of knowledge, we can come closer to the truth and discover more about our own potential as conscious beings. These concepts are not just abstract ideas, but have practical applications, and by engaging with them, you are actively shaping your own life and experience, and by doing so you become an active co-creator of your own personal reality. Your understanding of consciousness, intention, and the death process can dramatically influence your experience, so by taking ownership of this journey, you also become the architect of your own life and death experiences, which empowers you in a way that is beyond what you may have considered. By truly owning this journey, you begin to realize that you have always been in control of your own destiny. So, as you embark on this journey, I encourage you to explore these concepts further. Start by focusing on your present moment awareness, on setting intentions, and on exploring various spiritual and philosophical teachings that resonate with you. Delve deeper into the topics that were presented in this video, come to your own conclusions, and create your own unique and personal understanding. And now, I will leave you with a final question. If death is just a transition, what does this reveal about the true nature of your experience here and now?